fans, sports collectors, and all hobbyists. Welcome to the Card King Sports and Variety Show. I'm your host, the Catman, Brian Cataquet, a.k.a. the Card King. We are live on ABC's KMET 1490am.com. Your number one spot right here for news and talk on the West Coast. You can also catch my show live on Alexa by saying, Alexa, play KMET Radio for your listening pleasure. We are awaiting a phone call from a guest, so we will wait till he calls in. In the meantime, we could begin with baseball season, which is right around the corner. And for the very first time, the Topps Baseball Card Company held a 1,000,000-card rip party a few days ago, and to commemorate, to celebrate the 2020 baseball season. And the story goes, the Topps Company held its first ever 1,000,000-card rip party at AT&T Stadium in Dallas, Texas, and this was Tuesday. It was held on Tuesday, and it featured the 2019 Rookie of the Year, Pete Alonso of the New York Mets, and other players alongside Alonso, which ripped open more than 1 million baseball cards from over 21,000 jumbo Topps baseball card packs. And they were packs from Series 1, the Series 1 collection. Alonso, the story goes, Alonso ripped open the first pack of cards to commemorate the official launch of the collection. And the first of its kind, this event has ever been held, something in the history of Topps, which Topps Company's been around for many, many years, decades, and they never held this type of event. But it's the first time ever, and this was held last Tuesday. And this is really to promote the 2020 Topps baseball cards. And I thought it was a really cool idea because you got now baseball players promoting how popular the baseball card hobby is, even in 2020. We all know that the baseball card hobby has always been popular. It's been a business since the 1930s. Since the 1930s, when card dealers at that time were selling baseball cards via telephone call, in the 3 to 4 cent range in price. So we welcome back to the program, rock and roll icon, Bobby Rydell. Bobby, thanks so much for being back on the program.
My pleasure, Brian. How are you?
Very well, Bobby. I wanted to ask, last time you were on, I didn't get a chance to talk about your book. So if I may ask you a few questions about Bobby Rydell, Teen Idol on the Rocks, A Tale of Second Chances.
Right.
Yeah, so we'll begin. So for you, Bobby, wanting to perform, it all began at age 5, watching a solo feature done by drummer Gene Krupa. Is that correct?
Actually, his name is Gene Krupa.
Gene Krupa.
Yes,
But because I was reading the book and I saw, and it states that he was doing a solo act, and you kind of really gravitated towards that.
The story is when I was 5 years old.
Right.
My father loved big bands, so he wanted to introduce me to big band music at a very early age. So he took me to a theater in Philly called the Earl Theater, and the big band was the Benny Goodman Band. Now I hadn't heard of Benny Goodman. I was 5 years old. I barely was listening to the radio back then, and so my dad takes me to see this wonderful orchestra, and I was enthralled by just one guy. And I told my father, I said, I don't know who that guy is, Daddy, but I want to be him. And that was Gene Krupa, who was playing drums for the Benny Goodman Orchestra at the time.
Okay, I got the last names wrong, but it's Gene Krupa.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, and now, just let me know if I'm getting personal here, Bobby, because this book had a lot of personal stories.
Right.
And, so just let me know if I'm getting too personal with you. What was the relationship with your mom?
Not good at all. My mom, was, how can I put it? She wasn't a very, very nice person. And, back then, I was born 1942, and my mother was born, of course, way before that. And there was nobody knew what the heck bipolar was, and my mother was bipolar. And she was just mean. She was just a very, very mean person. And I never really got along too well with my mother. My father was my champion. He was my champion. And in my life, I was left with my mother because my dad had passed away, and my first wife, Camille, passed away in 2002. And for 7 years, I was left with my mother, just her and me, and it wasn't a very, very happy household. Before my wife passed away and my dad passed away and my grandparents passed away, but after all of them passed away, I was living with her for 7 more years, and it was hell.
So how was your mom's upbringing? Were you told any stories about how your mom's upbringing was?
Not really, no. I never knew, but she used to, oh God, when I was a child, she used to lift me up in the air and throw me on the bed and throw things, potatoes at me. And, she was just weird. She's just a very, very weird person. Everybody who really didn't know her behind closed doors loved her. They thought that she was the sweetest person on 2 feet, but behind closed doors, she became like a Jekyll and Hyde,
Yeah, now the sense that I got, Bobby, by the way, this is a great book. The sense that I got reading this book, I got a sense that, I don't know, I felt that your mom may have had some envy towards you making it big one day. Because maybe, I don't know, maybe she didn't accomplish anything, at her younger age.
No.
Is that fair to say? What do you think?
Right. No. She was extremely proud of my success. I mean, and the only reason that I became successful was because of my dad. The only reason I'm in the business today is because of my dad. But she was enthralled, with my success, and she more or less kind of like. She tried to take, control of it, but, she adored every minute of it, when she was alive. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because like you mentioned, your dad was your champion, and, I took away reading this book that he had more of a positive outlook on the world than your mom. Would you say that's accurate?
She was, no, she was enthralled with everything that happened, in my career. She was Bobby Rydell's mother, and everybody, kind of loved her. But like I said, behind closed doors, she was a different person. She was totally different.
Okay, now the story goes, Bobby, you were driving down, on the Jersey Turnpike into New York City back in the late 50s, early 60s, maybe 59, 60, and you hear this.
They're kissing in Cleveland, Kansas City team. They're wailing in Wildwood, back in Waterloo. There's boots all over, even in St. Louis. So baby, get ready, I'm kissing you. Oh baby, 'cause summertime is a kissing time. USA, so treat me right, gonna make me fight the Battle of New Orleans tonight. They're kissing on beat.
So that was mentioned in the book, Bobby. You were on the Jersey Turnpike into New York City, and you hear "Kissin' Time" for the first time on the radio. Can you take me back to that feeling?
Oh, God, yeah. Well, we were going to New York to do whatever. My manager and I, Frankie Day, were, driving on the Jersey Turnpike. And we get into the area where we can listen to WABC radio. And it was Bruce Morrow, I believe. And he says, there's a new guy out with a brand new song, and we think it's going to be a real big hit for him. Here's Bobby Rydell with "Kissin' Time." And that's the first time I ever heard myself, coming through the radio, driving on the Jersey Turnpike. It was a wonderful feeling, no doubt about it.
Now, I also know that when writing this book, you have mentioned that you wanted to be as honest as you can, right? Was there ever any heavy drinking in the home life when you were younger?
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Heavy drinking, from your family.
Oh no,
pops,
no, nothing whatsoever. No, my grandfather used to have a glass of wine at dinner. He loved red wine, and my grandmother was a tremendous cook. She was absolutely wonderful cook, and but there was no alcoholics or anything like that in the household. No, nobody really drank.
Yeah, Bobby, let me know if I'm getting too personal. I'm just going through the book. It's a great book.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned in the book that you were a big vodka drinker, but you were still able to perform. How were you able to still have stamina?
Well, I would never at that particular time drink before a show. I was always, rock solid, before a show. But after a show, I drank to the point where I became an alcoholic. And at one point in my life, specifically 2012, I had to have a liver and a kidney transplant because of the drinking. And that all happened. I started drinking very, very heavily when my first wife passed away. And she was only 60 years old. We were married 35 years, and all of a sudden she's gone. So I turned to the bottle, and specifically vodka.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so sorry about that. My condolences. So I also read that in 2010, like as you mentioned, 2010, the doctor tells you that if you don't stop, you're going to be dead in 2 years.
Yeah,
is that correct?
Right. Yeah, that's right. There was a doctor in Philadelphia. His name was Dr. Newman. And he said to me, and specifically said, Bobby, if you don't stop drinking in 2 years, you're going to be dead in 2 years. So I figured, what the hell, let me keep on going. And he was, exactly on the money, because 2 years later, 2012, I needed a new kidney and a new liver because of the drinking.
Wow. Now, I also love the story that you told that you're meeting Sinatra. You were 19 years old at the Copa, right? And it was the first time that you meet Sinatra, and at the same table, Maggio was there. Is that right?
Yeah. The whole story is my dad and my manager and I went to the Copacabana to see a comedian by the name of Joey Lewis. And one of the waiters, Carmine, he told me that Sinatra was in the room and would I'd like to sit with him. And I told Carmine, I said, oh, my God, no, Carmine. I was only 19 years old sitting with Sinatra. Anyway, make a long story short, of course I wanted to meet him. At the end of the show, he leaves. So I figured, well, that was it. I blew it. I go upstairs to the lounge to say goodnight to Jules Padell, who was the owner of the Copa. And through the kitchen doors comes Sinatra. And I said to him, I called him Uncle Julie. I said, Uncle Julie, all I want to do is shake his hand. He says, you want to meet Frank? I said, yeah, I'd love to. So Sinatra sitting at a table with Sammy Kahn and Jimmy Van Heusen, two marvelous lyricists, songwriters, Richard Conte, a marvelous actor, Joe DiMaggio, and Sinatra. And Jules Padell, we walk up to the table. Jules Padell hits Sinatra on the shoulder, and I almost died. And he said, Frank, I want you to meet the kid. And Sinatra stood up with those blue eyes, and he put out his right hand. He looked at me, and he said, how you doing, Robert? Called me Robert. I said, wow. Fine, man. I said, fine, Mr. Sinatra, how are you? He says, I'm just wonderful. Would you care to join us? I said, it'd be my pleasure. So I sat there, and I didn't say two words. I was in awe. My mouth was agape. I was enthralled with the whole situation, and I really didn't say anything. They're talking music, this, that, the other thing, telling jokes and stories. And Sinatra turns to me and he said, what do you drink, Robert? I was 19 years old. I said, Coke, and after sitting with him, he came over to our booth that we were sitting in, my dad, my manager, and myself, and we took pictures with him. He was absolutely wonderful. I've got a picture at home. He has my album. I think it's under his left. I can't remember, left or right arm. He has my album, Rydell at the Copa. And he just writes to me, to Bobby, best always, your friend, Frank Sinatra.
Oh, my God. Well, how was DiMaggio? Did he say much?
No, he didn't say much at all. But years later, in Tampa, Florida, we're doing a golf tournament, and I was the headliner of the show, but I played in the golf tournament as well. And Joe DiMaggio was there, so I asked, it was a gentleman who traveled with Mr. DiMaggio. I think his name was Carl. And I said, Carl, do you think by any chance I can get a baseball signed by Mr. DiMaggio? He said, absolutely, Bobby. So one of the golfers we're in the men's locker room, had an American League baseball in his locker for some reason. He gave it to me, and I took it over, and I said, Mr. DiMaggio, Bobby Rydell, I don't know if you remember, but we sat together at the Copacabana back in 1961, yada, yada, yada. And I said, would you mind signing your autograph on this baseball? And I said, I just don't want your signature, Mr. DiMaggio. I said, can you just write to Bobby? And whatever you care to write, yada, 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 signed Joe DiMaggio. And that's what he did.
Oh, that's great. But what I would say is they were also looking at you, a 19-year-old. You were a phenomenon. I mean, come on. I mean, you sold 25 million records in your career, right? So they were looking at a phenomenon at 19. They knew it.
Yeah,
or at least I would think Frank Sinatra knew it.
But Brian, wait a second. At 19 years old, going back to when my father introduced me to the Benny Goodman Band, I became a big fan of the American Songbook. So here I am sitting with the guy who is the American Songbook, Frank Sinatra. My God, what did I have? 2 records, 3 records at the time? I don't know what the hell I had. And I'm looking at Sammy Kahn and Jimmy Van Heusen, who wrote the title song of one of Mr. Sinatra's albums called Only the Lonely, probably one of the best ballad albums Sinatra ever recorded. Richard Conte, who I adored, making films, and Joe DiMaggio, who was, my father, that was my father's guy. That was my father's champion. So just to be able to sit at that table with those, 4 people, my God, it was, and I'm only a kid, I'm sure they must have thought, yeah, it's a really nice meeting, this young singer, but I was enthralled with them. Are you kidding?
Oh, forget it. Now, also, I read that you were an Eddie Joost fan, since we're on the topic of DiMaggio and baseball. Is that correct? You were Philadelphia Athletics? Well,
my father was never a Philadelphia Phillies fan. We had the American League Ball Club in Philly, back in, in the late 40s, early 50s, yada, yada. And I used to watch the Philadelphia Athletics, play. And one of the guys was the shortstop, and his name was Eddie Joost. And also, the day that I went to that game, the guy who was pitching was a guy by the name of Bobby Shantz. And so I became big fans of Bobby Shantz and Eddie Joost. And I think I was 5 years old. I don't remember. My dad took me to Shibe Park, and where the Athletics were playing. And, as a kid, I just hollered out, hit it over the wall, Eddie. He was up at the plate at bat. And lo and behold, he hit a home run. And I figured he hit it for me. So I became a big fan of Eddie Joost. Yeah.
Hey, Bobby, when you were a kid, did you ever collect baseball cards? Or comic books or anything?
No, never collected them, read them. I read comic books. We all read comic books back then. I had, everybody had a few baseball cards. I never really was a collector, of the baseball cards. And, so who knows, maybe one of the cards that I had could have been worth, a couple of $1 million. You never know. But we used to we used to play a game. We'd throw the baseball cards against the wall, and if it came up heads with the picture or tails with the biography on the back, that's how you win or lost the game. But no, I was never really a collector.
Well, mostly the kids in the neighborhood, right? In your Philly neighborhood would collect and flip the cards and put them in their bike spokes. Is that correct?
That's what we did, yeah, to make the bicycle sound like a motorcycle. You put the baseball cards in there, or you blew up a balloon and put it on the rear of the bicycle to get that motorcycle sound. Yeah.
So I also read that you did a performance with Frankie Avalon. It was January. It was a few weeks ago, January 2nd, right? It was you, Frankie Avalon,
and Fabian. Yeah. We have a show called The Golden Boys, and we've been doing it since 1985, and it's bigger today than it was back then. Matter of fact, we're doing a show, Frankie, Fabian, and me, this coming Sunday in Atlantic City at the Borgata.
So that's when, this coming Sunday?
Yeah, this coming Sunday at the Borgata. Yeah, but I think it's a private show. I'm not quite sure, but I think it's private.
Okay, now for the audience listening, Bobby, if they want to purchase the Bobby Rydell Teen Idol on the Rocks, where can they go to?
I have a site, BobbyRydell.com, and they could purchase the book. And there's, you see tour dates, merchandise, photographs, so on and so forth. You just go, BobbyRydell.com, merchandise, and that's where the book is listed. And they can buy the book from my site, BobbyRydell.com.
And speaking about merchandise, Bobby, do you ever get tired of signing autographs?
No, not really. No, I really, really enjoy meeting, the fans, who have, been with me since, my God, 1959, 60 years in the business. So, no, I always take the time to either take a picture or sign an autograph. Absolutely never get tired of it.
All right. And so I appreciate a few minutes, Bobby. Thank you for being kind and answering a few questions.
It's my pleasure, Brian. Thank you ever so much for the time.
All right. Take care of yourself.
You do the same.
Thank you, Bobby. That was the legendary Bobby Rydell, and his site is BobbyRydell.com. Now, I picked up this book. It's Bobby Rydell, Teen Idol on the Rocks, A Tale of Second Chances. And I purchased this on Amazon. And I tell you, there's a lot of personal stories on Bobby Rydell's life. And it really, as I mentioned to Bobby, he wanted to be honest when writing this book, as I heard from his other interviews. And there's a lot of honest tales in this book, Bobby Rydell, Teen Idol on the Rocks, A Tale of Second Chances. And it really delves into Bobby Rydell's personal life. And, my first question to Bobby Rydell, I got the last name wrong. It was Gene Krupa. But the book states that at age 5, watching Gene Krupa, Bobby, as Bobby mentioned, his dad took him to this show, and Gene Krupa kind of stood out, and it states it in the book. Gene Krupa stood out, and Bobby noticed him, and that was at age 5. And then it talks a lot about Bobby's personal relationship, with his first love, which my condolences, passed away, as he mentioned. And it also, delves into the difficult time Bobby had with, his drinking, which he finally got over, thank God. And, he's definitely a legendary figure in the world of music. And I wanted him on for a few minutes just to hear his voice. And as I mentioned to Bobby, the statistic goes that he sold, 25 million albums worldwide. So that's, it's an amazing accomplishment. And as Bobby mentioned, he was a Eddie Joost fan. He likes sports. He mentioned this in his last visit to the program, that he was a big sports fan. So, it was an honor to speak to Bobby again. Now, I have a couple of minutes left. Everyone listening can log into my eBay site, and I currently have up for auction at an affordable price. I have a 1940 team signed baseball of the New York Giants. One has recently sold in the past for about $3,000 to $3,500. It's a 1940 team signed baseball of the New York Giants. Mel Ott is on the ball, and so many other stars from 1940. Original is professionally graded. It's professionally graded by Beckett Authentication Services, and I have a price of $1,200, but you can also make me an offer. So there's a chance to buy this 1940 team signed baseball for $1,200. You can also make me an offer. One has sold for $3,500. So I have it less than half of a price, and the signatures are very visible and in nice, decent shape. So you can log into my landing page on the KMET site, go onto my eBay site, and it's a 1940 New York Giant team signed baseball. Bobby Rydell, thank you for being on. And until next week, happy collecting to all.